Fine recording. Welcome, everybody, to our Protecting Your Legacy Through Conservation-Based Estate Planning webinar series. Tonight, we'll be talking about reducing your property taxes and stewarding your land. My name is Paul Catanzaro, and I am a professor of forestry at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I also serve as the state's extension forester. I would also like to introduce Guthrie Diamond, who is a graduate student working with me at UMass, who has been instrumental in organizing this and is working behind the scenes here at this webinar to make it run smoothly. This is the second of our three-part webinar series. For those of you that were here last month, we talked about deciding the future of your lands and went over some basics frameworks. We talked about things like setting goals, different forms of ownership, determining the ecological and financial value of your land. So we really tried to lay a foundation for thinking about how to decide the future of your land and a way to sort of move forward with it. Tonight, we're going to be talking about reducing your property taxes with the Chapter 61 program and answer questions about stewarding your land. We know that for many landowners, property taxes can be a real hindrance, and both in terms of ownership, but also in terms of passing it on to prospective new owners, particularly heirs. So we're going to talk about the Chapter 61 programs, as well as answer questions about stewarding your land. I do want to just let you know that the recording from our first webinar is uploaded on our YouTube channel, and I believe Guthrie is putting that link into the chat right now. Our third webinar will be choosing a conservation tool. So for those of you interested in permanent land protection, we are going to have Olivia Lukasik from the Trustees of Reservation next month on April 22nd talk to us about land protection tools and working with a land trust and some of the considerations with that decision. I want to acknowledge our financial sponsors, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, their service forestry program, who works directly with private landowners. They have funded this outreach work over the last 10 to 12 years. And they do so because they recognize the importance of keeping forests as forests, recognize that the average age of a landowner in Massachusetts and around the eastern US is around 65. So we're in the midst of this significant intergenerational transfer where people are making decisions, people just like you, family forest owners, making decisions about the future ownership and use of their land and maintaining land as forest. And in large parcels is important to reaching our overall conservation goals and maintaining the benefits that we derive from forests. And so I want to acknowledge their support. Not only are they supporting us financially, but one of our speakers is from DCR Service Forestry, who I'll introduce in a moment. I want to just step back for a moment and talk about and just pull on a couple threads from our first webinar. If you haven't seen it, like I said, you can see the recording. For those of you that were there, remember that we talked about the importance of setting goals as step one, and there are really two kinds of goals. There are these personal goals about what you want to do with your land and how you want to see it be used. And then there are these financial goals often. Land is often the largest, most significant asset in one's portfolio. And so land often comes with both these personal, but also these financial goals, that the reality of being okay in retirement or being able to pass land on or options to kids. So there are both these personal and these financial goals. We talked about estate planning and estate plan not being, a singular document, but really a combination of tools and documents that help you reach these goals. And tonight we're going to talk about the Chapter 61 program, and it is one tool that can actually help you achieve both some personal goals, keeping forest as forest, but also and well managed, but also some financial goals by helping to save property taxes. We talked at our last webinar about, estate planning, conservation-based estate planning, sometimes feeling overwhelming or sometimes feeling like like you're not sure where to start. And so we boiled it down. Here it is, sugaring season. So we boiled it down to two, prime questions that you can start with. And that first is, would you like to determine who's going to own the land next? And we talked at our last webinar about tools such as wills, ownerships, to different types of ownership vehicles, whether they be direct or indirect, and ways that land can be passed on. And tonight we're going to talk about this second decision, which is, do you want to ensure that some or all of your land stays in its natural state? In other words, do you want to decide the future use of the land through this conservation-based estate planning process? And if you do want to decide how your land will be used in the future, then there's this other decision point. Do you want to decide how it can be used temporarily? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight with the Chapter 61 programs. Or do you want to make some decisions permanently? And that's what we're going to talk about at our next webinar. So tonight's webinar, we're going to talk about the Chapter 61 programs. I'm very pleased to have Chris Capone from the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation Service Forestry Program. Chris is a service forester. Before becoming a service forester, Chris was a private forester. So he's worked with landowners in multiple capacities. He's worked with the Chapter 61 program, both as a private forester, but also as a service forester who implements the 61 program in his district. I'm also pleased and proud to say that Chris is an alumnus of our UMass forestry program. So pleased to have him tonight. And I'm also going to introduce Gabrielle Hayden, who's our second speaker. Gabrielle is a consulting forester. She's a private forester, and she'll explain what that is and what a consulting forester does. She works with Longview Forest here in Western Massachusetts. And I'm also pleased and proud to say that Gabrielle is an alumna of our forestry program as well. So with that, I'm going to stop my share, and Chris, hand it over to you.
All right, so hi everyone. Let me get my screen up here real quick. All right, so can everybody see that all right? All right, so
looks good,
so
Chris.
Okay, good. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Chris Capone. Thanks for the great introduction, Paul. Yeah, going to be talking tonight about Chapter 61 programs. So we'll talk about all three of the Chapter 61 programs, Chapter 61, 61A, and 61B. We'll go over who they're for, why they're around, how they can help you, and how you go ahead to get started with them if it's something that you are interested in. So before I talk about Chapter 61, I just did want to give a little bit of background on DCR's Service Forestry Program. We're not that well known of a program within DCR, but I do like to think that we have a pretty big impact on Massachusetts landscape. Our core mission as a program is to encourage sustainable forest management on privately and municipally owned forest lands. And we do that in a few different ways. So we provide outreach and training to landowners like we're doing here tonight. But we also provide outreach and training to professional loggers and foresters as well. We also have a regulatory role too. So we administer, manage, and oversee the Chapter 61 programs we'll be talking about tonight, as well as Chapter 132. And what Chapter 132 is it's the Forest Cutting Practices Act. So anytime somebody has a commercial timber harvest on their property, whether it be public or private land, we become involved just to make sure that all state regulations are being followed throughout the harvest. There are 11 service foresters in all throughout the state, so 10 other service foresters aside from myself. If you don't know who your service forester is, the best place to figure that out is on our website. So DCR Service Forestry, if you Google that, page should come up. Our map is right on the main page there. I also do have a QR code that should bring you right to that map as well. If all else fails, if you can't figure out who your service forester is, I will have my contact info available, so you can just shoot me an email, give me a call. We can get you connected with your service forester if it's not me. All right, so I have tonight's my presentation for tonight kind of broken up into three main topics. So I wanted to start by just talking about the status of Massachusetts forests. So just how are forests doing? How do they compare to other states? And what kind of forest loss are we kind of experiencing lately? Then I want to spend obviously the bulk of the time talking about our current use Chapter 61 programs. And then to wrap things up, I will go over how to get started with Chapter 61 if you're interested. So with that, I will get going on the status of our forest. So uh, when you drive down the road in Massachusetts, unless you're out toward like Boston or in Worcester or one of the more urban areas, if you're looking out the windows of your car, more than likely what you're going to be seeing is a lot of forest land. Massachusetts has a lot of forest, which is a good thing. But if you look at the chart here to the left, you can see that most of the forest in Massachusetts is privately owned. So a lot of people just kind of assume or think that our forests are owned by some form of government, whether it be state, local, or federal. But that's not the case in Massachusetts. Here, 64% of our forests are owned by private landowners like yourselves. And that's a great thing because private forests provide a lot of the same benefits that public forests do. I don't think I need to go over all the benefits that forests provide us. We're all here because I think we recognize those benefits. But because these forests are privately owned, a lot of them can be susceptible to becoming developed. So I think this chart here is kind of interesting. It kind of gives you a perspective of kind of where Massachusetts sits compared to other states as far as population and forests and everything else. So if you look at the chart here, you can see we're not a very big state. We're 45th for land size, so one of the smaller states in the country. But if you look at our population, you can see that we rank number 15. And then if you look at our population density, you can see that we're number 3. So we have a lot of people crammed into a small state. But one of the good things here is you can see that we also have a lot of forest land. We rank number 11 among all 50 states at being, this is saying 63%. I think my last slide said 64, but right around that 63, 64% level. So we do have a lot of people, but we also have a lot of forest, and you can understand how those can kind of conflict. So we have seen forest loss before. I like taking a look at this chart here. I think it's a pretty interesting one. If you take a look at the two lines that are charted here, you can see population in orange. And this is through time. So it starts in 1750 and then goes all the way up to almost to present day. Looks like it ends at right around 2020. So if you look at this chart, the population line is pretty boring, just kind of trends upward through time. But there's a lot more variation in the green forest area line. So if you take a look at this one, you can kind of see that we've had some forest loss, but we've also had some forest gain as well. So from 1810 to 1870, Massachusetts actually lost about 2 million acres of forest land, which is a ton. That amounts to about 33,000 acres a year, which is just an unthinkable amount of land. But it was mostly a soft conversion. So this, if you're familiar with Massachusetts land history, during this time, all the forests were being cut and turned basically into agricultural, or being cut for agricultural purposes. So they'd be turned into field or pasture or something like that. So this is what we call the soft conversion. They're cutting down the forest, but what's coming up in place is something that if it's abandoned, a forest can regrow from fairly easily. And that happened all the way up to 1870, when obviously people kind of picked up and left the area, moved west for richer soils. Our farms were abandoned, and we saw a period of forest gains. And then again, in the early to mid 1900s, we started seeing a decrease in forest land again. The difference this time around is it's not being cleared for agricultural purposes. It's not what we call a soft conversion. It's more what we call a hard conversion. So forests are being lost for housing and other things like impervious surfaces, roadways. We see a lot of soil compaction. It's not to say these areas can never become forest again, but obviously if you just packed up and walked away from it, it would take a lot longer than our abandoned farm fields that we had in the past. So if you look at some more recent data, luckily we're not losing 33,000 acres a year like we were in the past. This chart goes up to 2017. You can see in the mid 80s up to 99, we're at about 40 acres a day. And it's kind of been slowing since. Again, this chart only goes till about 2017. So I would assume, just kind of driving around, seeing the development going on, I would assume that it's probably ticking upward again lately. So we're still losing significant amounts of forest, not the 33,000 acres a day, but we are losing forest land. And development and more housing is definitely needed. It's something that we do need, but it's important that we do that in thoughtful ways that really minimize our forest loss. So if you take a look at this, here is a land use map. This kind of gives you an idea of where the more developed areas are in the state. The red areas are going to be your more developed, high intensity type areas. So we only expect these to expand into the future. Obviously, cities we expect to expand outward. And then along major routes connecting cities, connecting out to Boston, we expect to expand as well. So you can kind of connect the dots between these clusters here and figure out where kind of the major routes are through the state. And we just expect those to kind of grow outward into the future. And again, it's important to expand. We just want to do that in thoughtful ways that really minimize forest loss. And that is where Chapter 61 programs come into play. So getting into Chapter 61 and exactly what current use tax programs are, we'll go over each of the programs. In Massachusetts, our current use tax programs are called Chapter 61 programs. We have 3 of them, 61, 61A, and 61B. So we'll spend some time now going over each of them. All right, so what is a current use tax program? So a current use tax program taxes your property based on its current use rather than its potential value. So most properties that aren't in a current use tax program, like Chapter 61, are more than likely being taxed under Chapter 59. And what that does is it bases your taxes off the commercial value of the property. So when you go from Chapter 59 and you enroll into Chapter 61, you're going to see a reduction in your taxes because you're not going to be taxed based off the higher commercial value of the property, but instead you'll be taxed based off of its current use. Chapter 61 is a 10-year commitment. So in exchange for making that 10-year commitment to keep your property undeveloped and in its current use, you'll receive that tax break for those 10 years. And that's kind of the basic idea behind it. The purpose of it is really just to encourage landowners to keep their land as open space and to discourage development of forest land. So again, we have 3 kind of variations of Chapter 61. They're all kind of geared for for different land types. We have Chapter 61, which is more geared towards forest land, 61A, which is for agricultural land, and then 61B, which is for recreational land, although a lot of different categories can fit into 61B as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. So again, there are 3 Chapter 61 programs. All 3 of them are 10-year commitments. So when you enroll your property into a Chapter 61 program, you are making that 10-year commitment to keep your land undeveloped. At the end of 10 years, you can renew or withdraw if you want to, but it is a 10-year period you're signing up for. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about Chapter 61 forest land here. So Chapter 61, just plain 61, is meant for forest land. There's a few requirements to be eligible for the program. We'll go over those. So the first kind of major requirement is that you do need to have 10 acres or more of forested land. So that would exclude your house, if you have a lawn or any other kind of maintained areas, that can't go toward that 10-acre calculation. It has to be actual forest land. So you need 10 acres of forest. The land has to be devoted to the growth of forest products, and those can include a few different things. It could include timber, firewood, wood chips, and Christmas trees. It can include other things, but those are kind of the main products that we're talking about here. And then the last requirement to be able to enroll in Chapter 61 is you would need to have a forest management plan for your property, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a bit. So Chapter 61, again, like all programs, it is a 10-year period that you're signing up for. You refile every 10 years if you want to continue with the program. At the end of the 10 years, if you don't want to continue, you can choose not to refile. If you withdraw early, so during your 10-year period, there would be penalties associated. We'll go over those penalties later. You do have to produce forest products under Chapter 61, so timber harvesting or logging is required under Chapter 61. And those harvests can occur as frequently or infrequently as needed, and they're scheduled with a management plan. So again, a Chapter 61, one of the big requirements for eligibility is having an approved forest management plan. So a management plan is a 10-year plan basically that tells you about your current forest conditions. It talks about the desired future conditions for your forest, and then basically kind of a 10-year plan of how to get from where you are now to where you want your forest to be in 10 years or even longer. There are documents that are written by Massachusetts licensed foresters, and they are turned in to us at DCR on or before June 30th for us to review and approve and get back to you. So forest management plans do contain a lot of information. They describe current forest conditions, so we'll talk about tree species, size, density of your forest, how close are the trees growing together. It'll touch on forest health, tree quality. If you have invasive species, it might talk about that. And then it talks about recommendations to achieve the goals you have for your forest. And goals can sometimes kind of be hard to set. I think a lot of people think about their forest as something that kind of just sits, behind their house. It just kind of exists. You don't really have any real goals for it. It's just something that you enjoy. But if you can kind of think about the reasons why you own your forest land and how you can kind of enhance those reasons, then that's kind of a good way to, in my mind, to kind of think about what goals you might have for your forest. So some people really enjoy hunting, and that's the only reason they own their forest land. And so, whatever management practices they have or whatever kind of management they do on their property, they aim to kind of improve hunting conditions. Some people only own their forest land for firewood or wood products. Some people own it for privacy, other for aesthetics. So whatever reason you have your forest land, you can kind of think about how you might be able to improve that. So I did mention that if you are in Chapter 61, you do need to harvest timber. So if you are enrolled in Chapter 61, you do need to practice long-term forest management on your property. So you cannot high grade or be doing any kind of harvest that hurt the forest in the long run. Everything has to be done with long-term intentions in mind. Landowners do have to be actively engaged in forest management. And your management plan is what schedules what should be harvested and when. And I do want to point out too that management plans are adaptable. You can amend plans if you need to. We understand that forests are changing all the time, and we have all kinds of different weather events. We can have tornadoes, you could have fires, invasive pests move through. So it's important to be able to change your plans as things change. So these management plans can be adjusted. They're not set in stone. You don't need to follow it to a T for the 10-year period. If things change, you can change your plans as well. We as service forestry, we don't want anybody feeling overwhelmed or anxious about logging. I know that it's something that can turn a lot of people away from Chapter 61. They just don't want to have logging on their property, or they're not familiar with it. They're not comfortable setting up a timber sale, setting up a timber harvest. So we just want to make sure that nobody feels overwhelmed or anxious about it. Most landowners are not experienced in logging at all. It's something that's done maybe once a decade, if that. Typically, it's more close to a 20-year cycle. So it's something that people are only going to do a few times in their life, if that. So just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're here to help guide through the process if you have any questions or concerns. Not all recommendations in your management plan would involve tree cutting. Foresters can help with other things as well. Just want to point that out, that it's not all about cutting trees. We do have other recommendations in your management plan too to help improve your forest and help you meet whatever goals you might have for it. And again, just don't feel overwhelmed. Reach out if it's time for you to have a harvest on your property. We as DCR service foresters are here to help you guide you through the process. We can give you general management advice, but we were here to basically just be an unbiased third party to help you through things. So that's Chapter 61 in a nutshell. Can move on to Chapter 61A, agriculture. So like I said in the name here, it's meant for agricultural land. To be eligible for Chapter 61A, you need 5 acres of land. So it's a bit smaller land requirement than with Chapter 61. If you remember, Chapter 61 was 10 acres of forest land. For Chapter 61A, you need 5 acres of agricultural land. So those 5 acres, they have to be used for agriculture the previous 2 years prior to enrollment. So you can't just put an orchard and go and enroll. It has to be in production for 2 years previous before enrolling. The land has to be actively devoted to agricultural or horticultural use. And you have to have an annual gross sales of $500 for the first 5 acres. And then for every acre you enroll on top of that first 5 acres, you need to show an additional $5 value per acre each year. Chapter 61A is a little bit different because you do have to refile annually. It is still a 10-year program, but you need to go down to your local assessor's office every year to continue in that program for the 10-year period. So it's still a 10-year commitment, but you do need to file annually to stay in it for those 10 years. And that has a lot to do with the annual gross sales and kind of showing that you're meeting that requirement of the program. Another important thing to point out too is that forest land can be enrolled in Chapter 61A. It doesn't have to just be your kind of more conventional agricultural or horticultural crops. If you have a forest management plan prepared for your forest, that qualifies your forest and trees as an agricultural crop. So if you wanted to, you could enroll forest land under Chapter 61A as well. And then lastly, there's Chapter 61B. So I think of 61B as kind of the loosest of the 3 Chapter 61 programs. It has the fewest eligibility requirements, and it really kind of has a wide net as to what you can enroll in it. So to be eligible for Chapter 61, again, it's a smaller requirement than that 10 acres for Chapter 61. For 61B, it's 5 acres compared to the 10 acres for 61. Your land has to be either retained as substantially natural, wild, or in an open condition, or in a recreational use, or in a managed forest condition, or a pastured condition. So that fits a lot of different categories of land. Essentially, if it's open space that's being maintained as open space and it's not being developed, chances are it would probably qualify for Chapter 61B if it's 5 acres or more. It is similar to 61A in that you do need to refile annually with the assessor with 61B. So it's a 10-year program, again, but you do need to refile annually. One big, I think, common misconception that people have with Chapter 61B is that they assume that if they enroll in this, they need to open up their land to the public for recreation, but that is not the case. You can enroll in Chapter 61B and still post your property, and that's perfectly fine. You do not need to open up your property to public recreation if you're in this program. So we talked a little bit about how it does save you quite a bit in taxes, kind of went over the programs here, but I just want to give some kind of real world numbers and figures as to exactly how much you can save in these programs. So got a few different examples here. So we have a few different towns, got a few different acreages, kind of try to get a good range here. So anywhere from 13 acres up to 72, but we can just use this Sterling one for an example to work through here. So if you had 45.87 acres in Sterling, using the 2017 tax rate, your taxes under Chapter 59 would have been $5,144. So again, Chapter 59 is just no program, normal taxation. So that's what you'd be looking at for a tax bill for the year. So if you were to take that property and enroll it into Chapter 61B, your taxes would reduce greatly down to $1,286 for the year. And that equates to a 75% reduction. So if you go into Chapter 61B, your reduction rate would be 75%. That's always the case year after year. It's 75%. So you'll be paying 25% of the taxes you normally would be. If you go into Chapter 61 or 61A, that rate comes down even more. It gets to be that you're almost not even paying taxes on your property. It's so low. So if you take that property and enroll it into 61 or 61A, you're only looking at about $49.88 for your tax bill for the year. So it really reduces taxes greatly. It's a huge savings that you'll be seeing if you do choose to enroll in a Chapter 61 program. If you are curious to see what kind of savings you might have on your property, on Masswoods, you can, there is a calculator that you can plug in your information to. You just want to pull up your latest tax bill, go to this calculator on Masswoods, and plug in the information from that tax bill, and it should give you a pretty good idea as to what kind of savings you could see on your property. So it's also important to keep in mind that Chapter 61 doesn't just benefit the landowners that are enrolling in it. Landowners are obviously going to benefit from the reduction in tax rates, but the public benefits too in a lot of different ways. The public will benefit from undeveloped land by being provided with clean water, wildlife habitat, rural characteristics, local wood and food, and a whole host of other benefits. Chapter 61 also, it does help prevent extra strain on schools and town services because it removes at least some of the incentive to sell or build additional house lots. So now I just want to talk a little bit about filing your Chapter 61 plan. So it gets a little bit confusing as to who plays what role in this process. So when a landowner enrolls in a Chapter 61 program, a lien is attached to their property. And the purpose of the lien is just to ensure that the land stays undeveloped. So if you were to go to sell the property, the lien would be on there. And it just lets everybody know this property is in Chapter 61. So we at DCR Service Forestry, as service foresters, if you have a forest management plan prepared for your property, that gets turned into us, and we take a look at that plan, we review it, and if everything makes sense in it, if it all looks good, then we'll sign off on that plan and send that approved plan back to you. What you're going to do with that approved plan is take it down to the assessor's office, and that is kind of where you enroll into Chapter 61. So the actual enrollment into Chapter 61 is not when you send us your management plan, but it's actually when you go down to the assessor's office and enroll. So we, DCR Service Forestry, we don't enroll people in to Chapter 61. It's your local assessor that actually does that for you. And again, that forest management plan, the approved plan, is one of the requirements to get into Chapter 61. So you would just take that down to your assessor, fill out the forms there, and that's what actually enrolls you into the program. It is important to remember that when you sign up for Chapter 61 programs, it is a 10-year commitment to remain in the program. So at the end of the 10 years, you can pull the property from Chapter 61, but you're in it for 10 years. It's also important to reiterate that under Chapter 61, the landowner does need to refile every 10 years if they want to stay in the program. So if you do want to stay in Chapter 61, you would need to refile and have a new forest management plan prepared for your property. So it's a 10-year cycle. Every 10 years repeat, unless you want to come out, at which point you would just not renew. Under Chapter 61, you only need to go down to your assessor's office once. So we talked about enrollment. So you would just go down once to enroll, and that would be it. However, under Chapter 61A and 61B, like we talked about, you do need to go down every year to refile annually. So 61, you just go down once and you're good for 10 years. And then 61A and 61B, you would need to go down to the assessor's office at least once a year just to keep up with your 61 commitment. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about early withdrawal and some of the penalties that are associated with that. So penalties might apply if you withdraw from Chapter 61 programs early. So if all or a portion of your property is converted while you're enrolled in Chapter 61, penalties might apply. It's also important to remember that Chapter 61 programs are tied to the land itself and not the landowner. So when you're signing up for Chapter 61 and enrolling, you're not signing up, you're signing your land up for Chapter 61, regardless of who owns it. If they are applicable, withdrawal penalties would typically include either a rollback tax or a conveyance tax, and we'll talk about what those are in a second. Conveyance taxes and rollback taxes can get pretty confusing, and we tend to get a lot of specific questions regarding them. So if you have any questions regarding these taxes that are really specific to your property, I definitely just recommend reaching out to your local service forester or to your assessor to have that conversation, because they can get pretty complicated. So I'll start with conveyance taxes. So conveyance taxes are assessed if your land is sold or converted during the earlier years of enrollment to a use that's not compatible with Chapter 61 programs, and the tax amount's higher than the rollback tax. So it's important to remember you won't get taxed with both the conveyance tax or the rollback tax. It's either or. Whichever amount comes out to be higher is what you would be penalized with. So a conveyance tax is aimed for those that change land use during the first few years of enrollment, and it just levies a higher penalty if you come out in those first few years. So essentially what the tax would be is 10% of the total sale price of the property if the land is sold or converted in the first year, and then it would be 9% if that happens in the second year, 8% in the third, and so on, going down the line. After your first 10-year period, this tax no longer applies, and you'd only be dealing with the potential of rollback taxes if you convert. So if you're in Chapter 61 for 10 years and then you choose to renew for another set of 10 years, that second set of 10 years, you would not need to worry about conveyance tax. It only happens upfront, typically in the first few years of enrollment, if you choose to not keep up with your Chapter 61 commitment. Rollback taxes only come into play if you change your land use to an incompatible a use that's incompatible with the Chapter 61 programs, either during the 10 years you're enrolled or within 5 years of withdrawing. So this is one that catches people sometimes. Even after your 10-year Chapter 61 certification period is up, you do need to wait an additional 5 years for a cooling off period before you can develop. The rollback tax would equal whatever taxes you save by enrolling plus 5% interest for each year. And that would be calculated for up to 5 years. And then after, if it's for more than 5 years, if you're in the program for more than 5 years, they'll just use the most recent previous 5 years to base those taxes on. So those are rollback taxes and conveyance taxes kind of in a nutshell. Again, they can get very complicated. So if you have any really specific situations that you want to discuss, definitely feel free to reach out to myself. Your local service forester or your local assessor should have that information as well. So those are the tax penalties. The last thing to be aware of is the right of first refusal. So this is another part of Chapter 61 programs that can get a little bit confusing, but essentially what the right of first refusal does is it gives municipalities the option to match a bona fide offer to purchase your property if it's up for sale. If the owner isn't selling, but they intend to convert their property to a use that's not compatible with any of the Chapter 61 programs, then the municipality would have the option to buy the enrolled portion of the property at full market value, and that would be determined by an independent appraiser. This is only triggered when a landowner intends to sell for a non-compatible use, when a landowner changes land to a non-compatible use, or if a landowner withdraws from the program and changes use within 12 months. It is not triggered if a landowner switches to another current use program. So if you choose to go from 61 to 61B or any of the other programs, this would not be triggered. Construction for immediate family would also not trigger this. If you withdraw from the program, but keep land that's in a use compatible for the following 12 months with one of the Chapter 61 programs, then that would also not trigger right of first refusal. And if a landowner sells their property and the new owner signs an affidavit that agrees to maintain the land use and maintain their Chapter 61 status, then you would not have to worry about that as well. And more often than not, that's what we see happen. If a property is sold, the buyer will just sign an affidavit agreeing to maintain Chapter 61 status for whatever period is remaining in their plan period. One thing I did want to bring up too is that none of this would apply if you are selling to immediate family. So right of first refusal, conveyance tax, and rollback tax, none of that would apply if you are building a home for immediate family. So if you have a large lot and you think you might want to build a house on it down the line for your kids or something like that, you do not need to worry about any of these taxes or the right of first refusal. It does not come into play when building for immediate family members. So whenever I talk to landowners that have enrolled in Chapter 61, and I ask them, why they chose to enroll, it's almost always for one of these reasons here. It encourages open space. It's a huge tax savings. It helps show their long-term intentions that they do want to keep their forest a forest. It's a really important part of estate planning, and the thing we hear most often is it's the only way people can afford to keep their land in some cases. They just can't afford the taxes otherwise. So if all of that sounds good to you, you're interested and you want to get started with Chapter 61, we'll spend a little bit of time now just kind of going over how to go about doing that. So there are a few different ways you can enroll a property into Chapter 61. You do not need to enroll your entire property in 61. If you want to, you can just include portions of the property. So here's an example here. You can see that we have this excluded. This would not be included in Chapter 61. And what this is here is just a house, a garage, maybe your driveway, and a manicured kind of lawn area. So this area here you could not enroll this into any of the Chapter 61 programs. This would continue to be taxed at the same rates that you have been taxed at, but everything else here could be enrolled if you chose to. So if you wanted to enroll wetlands, a certain amount of wetlands can be involved or can be enrolled into Chapter 61. Obviously, all the forest can be enrolled if you want to, but you don't need to enroll the entire forest. I had talked about house lots for family members, not triggering any taxes or anything like that. But say you wanted to sell off a house lot in the future, and just to make a little bit of income down the line. If you wanted to, you could exclude that from your Chapter 61 application. So you can exclude portions of your property. So this portion of the property could be excluded from that plan. Doesn't require having a survey done or anything like that. It would just be part of your forest management plan, saying that this is not part of your Chapter 61 certification. So just want to point out there are multiple ways to enroll your property. It's not all or nothing. You can enroll just portions of the property as long as you're hitting those minimums that we talked about for each program for acreage. It can get a little bit confusing, the timeline for filing under Chapter 61. It gets confusing for me anyway. There's so many dates and then fiscal years start coming into play and it gets jumbled in my head. So this kind of just helps lay it out. So if you take a look at the timeline here, I have it starting January 2025. If you are interested in pursuing one of the Chapter 61 programs, we always recommend meeting with the service forester first to talk a little bit about your goals for your property and kind of just get you started and get you set up. That's completely optional. You don't need to. But you do want to start definitely talking to a forester sooner than later if you are interested. So if you look at the timeline, we're coming up at the end of March here, moving into April. So the first deadline you're going to come up against is delivering that completed forest management plan to us, DCR, and that's June 30th for that. So you do need to have a plan completed and turned into us at DCR by June 30th to get you in for the next cycle. So once you get that into us, like I mentioned, we will review that plan, make sure it all makes sense, make sure it's in everybody's best or in your best interest. And then we'll send that approved plan back to you. And then you have until December 1st to bring that to your local assessor's office to give them a copy of that approved plan and certificate and fill out your forms to get signed up. And then after that, it's kind of a waiting game. You do need to wait a little bit before you start seeing the tax break. So your Chapter 61 plan period would begin January 1st, 2026. So that's when that forest management plan kind of starts. That's when it starts its plan period. And then you wouldn't start seeing basically your reduced tax rates until your first quarterly tax bill, which usually comes around October. But taxation with that reduced rate would start July 1st prior to that. So after you apply, you have your approved management plan and get in. It does take some time to start seeing those tax reductions, but once you start seeing them, they'll keep going for that 10-year period. Working with the forester is definitely an important thing. You do need to have a licensed forester prepare your forest management plan for you. Mass Woods has a great section on their website where you can just plug in your town name, and it will give you a list of foresters who are all licensed in Massachusetts who are able to write forest management plans for you. I also did want to plug our forest stewardship program. We do offer cost sharing. So what we do is we offer cost sharing for forest stewardship plans, and a forest stewardship plan is essentially a forest management plan, but it has more information in it. So it talks just kind of more about your forest and just has more detailed information. It qualifies you for Chapter 61, just like your normal forest management plan would. But because we see the added benefit in having more information in your plan, we do help cost share those forest stewardship plans. So funding may still be available. I'm not sure what the status is on that currently, but I do have a link here and then a QR code that should bring you to that page if you are interested in having a stewardship plan written and would like to see if you could get that funded. I do want to say, though, that the cost of a plan, regardless of whether or not you have it cost shared, is easily made up for over the 10-year period in tax savings that you'll see. You really do save a lot in taxes, so any cost to have a plan prepared will be recouped pretty quickly. So yeah, to wrap things up, just a couple resources. Your local service forester. Again, that's just going to bring you to a map if you're curious to see who your service forester is, if you want to talk more about Chapter 61 programs with them, if you have any questions. Then also a Chapter 61 publication. This lives on Mass Woods website, but if you're more of a reader, want to read through things before talking about them, this is a great place to go. This has pretty much all the information you want to know about Chapter 61 programs. And then just lastly, plug for Mass Woods, because they've got, Paul's got a lot of great information on the site. So that does it for my presentation. Thank you. If you have any questions or comments you want to reach out to me later with, this is my email address and my cell number here too.
Thanks, Chris. I think we'll hold off on questions. There are a couple of questions in the chat that we'll hold off on to make sure Gabrielle can give her presentation, and then we'll put them all together. So Chris gave an outstanding overview of the 3 Chapter 61 programs and the role of a service forester. Service foresters really, I started my career as a service forester. I was really proud that I was a public employee that can come out and actually visit your property, give you free technical assistance and advice, and then they administer these programs. So they're not the ones writing the management plan, they're the ones reviewing them. So there's an entire cadre of private foresters, consulting foresters across the state that would work with you to help you refine your goals as far as your forest management, help you develop, do an inventory, help you develop a forest management plan. So tonight, Gabrielle has kindly agreed to talk to us a little bit about what a consulting forester is and the role they play in this Chapter 61 process. Gabrielle, can I hand that over to you?
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen. And all right. Can everybody see
Yep.
this?
Looks
Okay.
great. All set.
So my name is Gabrielle Hayden. I'm a licensed forester in Massachusetts. I work for Longview Forest, and today I'm going to be talking about what I do as a consulting forester. So what do I do as a forester? I write forest management plans for landowners, for the Chapter 61 program, the stewardship program, and also just for personal use. I plan and oversee forest management activities like timber harvests, tree planting, invasive plant management, timber stand improvement. I also help landowners access and navigate funding for these different activities. I do a lot of GIS mapping, and like some smaller or kind of like weird random miscellaneous projects. So the first thing that I do is I meet with landowners to discuss their goals for their land. And I ask questions like, why do you own your land? Or what do you value about your forest? What do you want your forest to be like in 50 years or even 100 years? And the most common answers that I get are, people really care about wildlife habitat. They care about, having a healthy forest. They recreate on their property. They're looking to generate some periodic income. And I also hear a lot of things like, I want to leave this for my grandchildren, or I want to leave my woods better than I found them. And then from there, I help them decide what the next best step is. So there's types of forest management plans like Chris went over. I work a lot with Chapter 61 and 61A plans. And then I also work a lot with the stewardship program, and it's not a pyramid scheme. This is just how I explain it to people. So the stewardship plan is a more in-depth forest management plan, and that's kind of like what the program is built on. And then from there, you could have this kind of add-on specifically for like bird habitat assessment. There's also now more recently like a climate resiliency program. And you can combine these things and have like a stewardship plan that is focused on like climate resiliency and like bird habitat. And you can be in 61 and you can be within the stewardship program, and those things can be separate, and you can also add them together. So, if we're doing a forest management plan, the first step is to do a forest inventory. And I basically ask the question, like, what do we have going on in these woods? I'm looking at tree species, the size, the timber products. I'm looking at forest health concerns like disease, pests, storm damage, invasive plants, excessive deer browse. I'm also looking at forest structure. So is there a nice distribution of old trees, young trees, big trees, small trees, very kind of like Dr. Seuss. And I'm looking at wildlife habitat. So are there snags and like cavity trees for nesting? Is there food to eat? Are there water resources? Is there like woody debris on the ground for foraging? And then from there, I prepare the actual forest management plan. So I write about my findings, and then I come up with some recommendations based on my findings and the landowner goals, and then I make some maps. And then I also oversee forest management activities. And so that could be timber harvesting. And this involves laying out the harvest area, marking trees to be removed or retained, creating maps, filing a forest cutting plan, mailing a notice of intent to abutters, finding a licensed timber harvester, writing and enforcing a contract. I do site visits and prepare progress reports. And then at the end, during closeout, I make sure that everything is up to snuff, the land is in good condition, and all regulations have been followed. I also do other forest management activities like tree planting or invasive plant management. And again, I'm like planning out these activities. I'm helping landowners access funding and navigate like funding sources, and just making sure that everything goes according to plan. And then I also do some kind of like smaller miscellaneous projects, like I build trails, I do boundary maintenance, making sure that, boundaries are clearly marked, which is a requirement to be in Chapter 61. And some important things to remember, I think, is that you can have a forest management plan without being in Chapter 61. You can do forest management projects without having a forest management plan. You can be in the stewardship program and not be in Chapter 61. And really the first step in deciding what is best for you in your land is to call your local forester so that they can help you figure out what the next best step is. And this is my email if anybody has questions and want to email me. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That was a wonderful overview of the role private foresters play. So we've got these two kinds of foresters. We have service foresters, which Chris represents tonight, and they work for DCR. There are service foresters that work all across the state. So no matter where you are in the state, you can call your service forester, ask them to come out and take a walk with you, or maybe you just want to talk over the phone. And then when you get to the point of hey, I think I'm ready here to either join 61 or I'm ready here to have a timber harvest or I want to work with someone to help control invasive plants, whatever that stewardship action is, then you would work with a private forester like Gabrielle, who can work with you one-on-one to put a plan together and put it into action. So those are sort of the two pieces of it. I know that the Chapter 61 program can be a tremendous tool if it's the right fit for you to your conservation-based estate plan. It's a wonderful contribution. We have a lot of landowners that we've worked with over the years that chose to go that route. That the property tax savings is obviously significant. And being able to pass their land on to their kids, for them to maintain it, for it to be well stewarded, are all objectives that past landowners have all very much appreciated about the Chapter 61 program. And as we said in our last webinar, this is a tool you can combine with other tools. So you can combine this with the forest stewardship program. You can combine this with a will, which will help transfer it, and then this one helps with the stewardship of the property taxes. So there's this is a wonderful a la carte option, so to speak. So let's move into questions. And there are a number of them in the chat, and I'm going to just work through those. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. When we're done with the ones in the chat, we'll go to live voice and you can unmute here. Let's see here. So the first question.
Should we just stop the recording before we get
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, please. Thank you, Guthrie. So